What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Mainly Movies, the channel where we talk about, well, mainly movies. And welcome back to another Halloween horror special, where in today's video we're going to be talking about the 1981 comedy horror, An American Werewolf in London. An American Werewolf in London is about two friends, Jack and David, who go and take a trip to England, where one night they get lost in the middle of nowhere in the complete pitch black. They start to hear strange noises which sound like animals, and then they get attacked by a werewolf. Jack ends up dying, and the other character, David, ends up surviving, but he himself is a werewolf.
Must have been a very powerful man.
Jack and I were not attacked by a man.
It's an animal. A wolf.
So welcome back to another Halloween horror special. I'm enjoying them so far. I hope you guys are enjoying them because I really like making these videos. These are great. This is my favorite time of the year. Start to get into that spooky season. And I'm also starting to get into the more obscure horror movies. Not so much obscure, but the forgotten 80s horror movies, or the ones that people don't talk about as much as the ones that I've already covered. I wanted to get a lot of the classics out of the way, like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Child's Play. I wanted to get all of those out of the way first, so then I can start talking about ones like Hellraiser or American Werewolf in London, or the next one I'm going to talk about, which I don't really feel like spoiling right now. But you'll see it. But yeah, An American Werewolf in London was a movie that I haven't seen since I was very young. It was actually probably one of the first horror movies that I saw. And so I thought now would be a great time to rewatch it and kind of refresh my memory for this video since it came out in 1981. I must say that although I said in my Hellraiser review that was my favorite movie that I wanted to talk about, I forgot how truly great this movie is. I think what throws a lot of people off about this movie is that it's not a straight horror or it's not a straight comedy. It's a mixture of the two genres, and when that is done right, it is perfect. For example, in my opinion, I think Evil Dead 2 is a mixture of comedy and horror, and it does it very well. This movie does that as well, and I'm just probably going to be listing off my favorite things in this movie, because I truly think this is a great film as a film as well, not just a horror movie or a comedy movie, which it does succeed in both of those. It's just a great, well-crafted film. But the first thing I want to talk about is the horror aspect, because this is Halloween and I'm talking about horror movies. And so I want to get into the little bit of horror aspect that it's got. The horror is more at the start of the movie. There's not really that much horror right at the end. The end goes really balls to the wall with the comedy, but the horror is more at the start. And yes, the banter between Jack and David and just how weird and absurd everything is at the start, that it does have its comedy elements at the start, but I think the start or the first half of this movie focuses more on the horror. But I truly think, like, when they are in the middle of nowhere and you hear the sounds of the werewolves, and it's just like it doesn't sound like a typical werewolf sound. It sounds really just it sounds more eerie and disturbing, and that kind of gives me chills. As well as, which I'll get more into in a minute, but the makeup effects that they chose on the friend Jack is so, like, it's really disturbing, and as like the movie progresses, Jack slowly like decays and becomes more of like a zombie, and just the makeup effects and everything just looks insane, and that is pretty creepy as well. But the next thing I want to talk about, which is probably the strongest part of this movie, is the comedy. Now, when you think this movie just can't get any funnier, it does. Just like I said, at the start, there's the banter between Jack and David. That's always really great. Also, like, how weird everybody acts, how absurd everybody acts. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is like a nightmare scene where David has this dream where he's just with his family, and then all of a sudden these Nazi werewolves just come in with like Nazi World War II weapons, and they just like gun down the whole family, even the kids, and then they slice his throat, and then it just like cuts back to him in the hospital. It's just such a bizarre scene, but it's so funny. It's just a very, very good scene. But the comedy really works, especially at the end. I forgot how funny, like there's this whole sequence in a porno theater, which is so funny, that he's talking to his friend Jack, who's dead, and he's also talking to all the people that he killed when he was a werewolf, while there's just these orgasms and moans going on in the background, and there's this really cheesy porno called like See You Next Wednesday, and it's just happening right in the background. It's absolutely hilarious. It's really, really funny. And then not only that, but he turns into a werewolf in it, and it almost looks like he's masturbating in the theater because he's just he's just groaning because he's in pain because he's turning into a werewolf. And then these people are asking if he's okay, and he's like go away, and they think he's like jacking off, which is absolutely hilarious. It's another great scene. And then to top that off, the usher comes in and gets murdered by a werewolf while this cheesy fucking porno is just going on in the background. It's so funny. It's another great sequence in the movie. Then it leads to the end where he runs loose, and which is another great comedy moment. Just like there's just all these shots of all these people dying and they get killed like left, right and center. Like it's just like one thing leads to another. Like a cyclist will go by, then he will get hit by a car, that car will smash into another car, people going like flying through the windshield, and then just like people are just getting hit, and it's like the werewolf's not even doing anything, it's just running around while all these people are crashing into each other. There's this like guy, and he's like standing by a car, and then another car skids out of control and it crushes him, and it's just like it just keeps going and going and going, and it was hilarious. I was just watching the end a minute ago and I was bursting out in laughter. It's so funny. It's actually it's probably one of my favorite comedy movies now. I'm so glad I rewatched it because it refreshed my memory on how good this movie actually was. But to get a little bit more technical, it's also very, very well edited. The editing is really good. There's a lot of humor in the editing. Like there's this one line, my favorite line in the whole movie, where this little kid, when the main character David wakes up after being a werewolf, and he's naked and he's in a zoo, and he needs something to cover up, so he steals this kid's balloon and he runs off with the balloons, and the little kid goes up to the mom and says, that naked American man stole my balloons. And then it just cuts right there, just this hard cut. It's the most perfect cut, as well as the ending. It's so abrupt. The ending is so abrupt, but just like the editing, the editing is really well done. It's just cut up so well in comedy timing, in horror timing. It's just really well done. Like the sequences where you see him as the werewolf and he's killing people out in the streets, that is just so well edited. Those sequences, as well as just the comedy. Like I said, the comedy timing with the editing is fabulous. Also, the performance by the main actor, I don't know what the main actor's name is, just let me Google it. David Norton, the actor that plays the main character David, and he does a great job with the comedy. Just like his outbursts and everything are just so great to watch. An American Werewolf in London is a must watch. This was great because most of the horror movies that I've been watching are straight, just full-on horror movies that are actually trying to scare you, where it's good to like have that one film that it's actually, that's probably like really bright. I'll move that just a little bit there, but it's good just to have that one movie that like you can goof off and watch. It's such a great funny movie, and it's actually kind of comforting. I was watching it and I was like kind of drifting off to sleep because I watched the first half last night and then I watched the rest just before, just to refresh my memory, but I was kind of like drifting off halfway. It was actually quite relaxing until the third act happens, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to handle that third act just then, so I had to wait until just before. But yeah, it's such a great horror comedy. And if you haven't seen it, I did spoil a lot just then, but if you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. Even though, like I said, you probably just had most of the movie spoiled to you. But if you have seen it, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. I think it's one of the best horror comedies that's out there. And yeah, so I highly recommend An American Werewolf in London. It's a great horror comedy, and you should check it out this Halloween. Anyway guys, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Stay tuned, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.